They said the Blackwell mansion could survive a war, but not the sound of a little boy crying. Rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Blackwell estate, turning the sprawling property into a blurred shadow of steel gates, black SUVs, and cold marble walls. Inside the nursery on the third floor, Noah Blackwell screamed until his tiny face turned red, his small fists shaking as tears soaked the blanket beneath him. 3 nights. 3 endless nights without sleep. The doctors had checked everything twice. Fever. Normal. Heart rate. Normal. Blood work. Perfect. Yet nothing stopped the crying. Not expensive toys flown in from Manhattan. Not the professional nannies Damien Blackwell had hired and fired within hours. Not the pediatric specialists who nervously avoided eye contact whenever the Mafia Alpha entered the room. The little boy simply cried and cried and cried, as if something inside him had broken. Damien stood near the doorway in silence, one hand in the pocket of his charcoal gray slacks while the other rested against the wall beside him. At 6'4", dressed in a fitted black button-up with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, he looked less like a father and more like the dangerous king of an empire nobody dared challenge. The dim nursery light sharpened the angles of his face, catching the silver streak near his temple and the exhaustion buried beneath his pale gray eyes. He had built an empire worth billions. Politicians answered his calls. Men twice his age lowered their voices when he entered a room. But none of that mattered when his son looked at him with terrified little eyes and kept crying anyway. "Mr. Blackwell," one of the house staff whispered carefully from behind him. "The new nanny has arrived." Damien didn't answer immediately. Noah's cries echoed through the room again, weak now from exhaustion. Something cold tightened inside his chest. "Last one," he finally said quietly. "If this doesn't work, we move Noah to the private clinic in Zurich tomorrow morning." The staff member nodded quickly and disappeared downstairs. Moments later, the nursery door opened again. Damien turned slowly, expecting another polished professional with perfect credentials and nervous hands. Instead, a young Omega stepped into the room carrying a sleeping toddler against his chest. He looked completely out of place inside the Blackwell mansion. His coat was damp from the rain, dark brown hair slightly messy from the wind outside, and his sneakers squeaked faintly against the marble floor. But it wasn't his appearance that caught Damien's attention. It was the child in his arms. The little boy couldn't have been older than 2. Curly dark hair, tiny hand clutching the fabric of the Omega's hoodie. Peacefully asleep despite Noah's cries filling the room. "I'm Ethan Miller," the Omega said softly, shifting the sleeping child higher against his shoulder. His voice carried the warmth of coffee on a cold morning, gentle enough that even Noah's crying briefly quieted between breaths. "This is my son, Leo. I'm sorry for bringing him with me, but daycare canceled at the last minute, and I didn't have anyone else." Damien stared at the child for one strange second too long. Something unfamiliar pressed against his instincts, faint and impossible to explain. Then Noah cried again, louder this time, and the moment shattered. Ethan immediately looked toward the crib. Concern crossed his face so naturally it didn't feel rehearsed. He stepped closer carefully, rocking Leo gently as he approached. "Has he slept at all?" Ethan asked quietly. "Not much," Damien answered. Their eyes met for the first time. Ethan froze. Just for half a second. Barely noticeable. But Damien noticed everything. The Omega's expression flickered with something sharp and startled before disappearing behind calm professionalism. "Can I try holding him?" Ethan asked. Silence settled over the room. One of the security men near the doorway shifted uneasily. Nobody touched anything that belonged to Damien Blackwell without permission. But Noah cried again, exhausted little breaths breaking apart in his chest. Damien looked down at his son, then back at Ethan. "Try." Ethan moved toward the crib carefully while rain continued crashing against the windows outside. And somewhere deep inside the cold walls of the Blackwell mansion, something began to change. Ethan moved slowly toward the crib, careful not to wake Leo against his shoulder. The nursery had gone strangely quiet except for Noah's uneven sobs and the soft sound of rain sliding down the glass windows. Damien watched every movement with the sharp attention of a man who trusted almost nobody. Ethan could feel those gray eyes on him like cold steel against his skin. He tried not to let his hands shake. "Hey there," Ethan whispered softly as he reached the crib. Noah's little face was wet with tears, his tiny chest rising too fast beneath dinosaur print pajamas that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. The sight tugged painfully at his heart. Noah looked exhausted. Not spoiled. Not difficult. Just scared. Ethan slowly lowered Leo onto the thick nursery rug beside the crib before leaning down toward Noah. "You have been trying so hard, huh?" he murmured gently. Noah cried again, weaker now, reaching small trembling hands toward Ethan without hesitation. Something inside the room shifted. One of the security guards near the doorway exchanged a startled look with the housekeeper because Noah had rejected every nanny who came near him for the past week. Ethan carefully lifted the little boy into his arms. Noah immediately buried his face against Ethan's chest like he had been searching for that comfort the entire time. The crying softened into tiny hiccups. Damien straightened near the doorway. His expression barely changed, but Ethan noticed the subtle tension leave his shoulders. "That is the first time he stopped crying in days," the housekeeper whispered under her breath. Ethan gently rocked Noah while instinct guided him more than experience. He had spent countless nights holding Leo through fevers, thunderstorms, and nightmares in their tiny apartment above the old laundromat downtown. He knew the helpless panic hidden beneath the child's tears. "He is overstimulated," Ethan said quietly after a moment. "Too many strangers. Too many people trying to calm him at once." Damien said nothing. Ethan glanced around the nursery. Expensive toys filled every shelf. A massive television screen covered one wall. A state-of-the-art baby monitor blinked softly beside the crib. Everything looked perfect except for the loneliness hanging in the room like cold air. Then movement caught Ethan's eye. Leo had woken up. The toddler sat sleepily on the rug, rubbing his eyes with tiny fists before noticing Noah in Ethan's arms. For a second, Leo simply stared. Then he slowly crawled across the nursery carpet toward the crib with the unsteady determination only toddlers possessed. Ethan's breath caught immediately. "Leo," he whispered carefully. But the little boy ignored him. Damien's security team shifted subtly, watching the child approach the heir of the Blackwell family. Noah noticed Leo too. The crying stopped completely. Absolute silence filled the nursery as Leo reached upward with his tiny hand and pressed it gently against Noah's cheek. Noah blinked once, then another time, and for the first time all night, the little boy smiled. It was small, barely there, but it transformed his exhausted face completely. Ethan froze. The housekeeper gasped softly beside the door. Damien stared at the two children without moving at all. Noah leaned forward in Ethan's arms, reaching clumsy little fingers toward Leo's hoodie sleeve while Leo giggled quietly. It sounded impossibly warm inside the cold mansion. Damien finally stepped closer. The expensive marble floor barely made a sound beneath his polished shoes. Ethan's pulse immediately quickened. Up close, Damien Blackwell carried the quiet gravity of someone dangerous enough that entire rooms naturally moved around him. But his attention was not on Ethan. It was locked completely on Leo. More specifically, on Leo's eyes. Pale silver gray under the nursery light. The same impossible shade as Damien's own. Ethan felt panic crawl ice-cold down his spine. He immediately bent to pick Leo up, holding him close against his chest again. "He is usually shy," Ethan said quickly, forcing calm into his voice. Damien did not answer right away. His gaze lingered on Leo for one long second too many. Then Noah made a soft whining sound and reached for Leo again. Damien's expression darkened slightly with confusion. "My son hates strangers," he said quietly. Ethan tightened his hold on Leo. Maybe he was just lonely. Damien looked directly at him then. Sharp. Assessing. Like he was trying to solve something invisible standing right in front of him. Outside, thunder rolled across the city skyline while rain continued falling over the Blackwell estate. And for the first time in years, Ethan Miller felt truly trapped. The nursery should have felt warmer after the crying stopped, but Ethan could not shake the strange pressure building in the air around him. Noah sat quietly in his lap now, tiny fingers curled tightly into the fabric of Ethan's sweater as if letting go would somehow make the fear return. Across from them, Leo sat on the rug beside the crib, happily stacking wooden alphabet blocks he had found near the bookshelf. Every few seconds, Noah glanced down at him like he needed to make sure Leo was still there. Damien noticed it too. Ethan could feel the alpha watching the boys with unsettling intensity from across the room. Not suspicious exactly. Worse. Interested. He only does that with family. The housekeeper whispered softly beside the door. Damien's eyes narrowed slightly. What? The eye contact, she explained carefully. Master Noah avoids almost everyone. Even doctors. Ethan immediately looked down, pretending to adjust Noah's blanket while unease twisted inside his chest. He had spent the last 2 years protecting Leo from questions exactly like this. Questions about silver eyes. Questions about scent compatibility. Questions about why Leo had begun presenting omega-sensitive instincts unusually early for a toddler. He could survive poverty, exhaustion, loneliness, but he could not survive Damien Blackwell discovering the truth. Noah suddenly made a soft, sleepy sound against Ethan's chest. Ethan froze in surprise. The little boy was falling asleep. After 3 nights without rest, Noah's tiny body had finally relaxed enough to surrender to exhaustion. Damien stepped closer immediately, stopping just beside the rocking chair. His scent reached Ethan then. Cedarwood. Cold rain. Expensive cologne layered carefully over the deeper natural alpha scent beneath it. Strong enough to make Ethan's omega instincts tense despite years of suppressants. Familiar enough to make old memories ache somewhere deep in his chest. Ethan lowered his eyes quickly. You can put him in the crib, Damien said quietly. Ethan nodded and carefully stood, carrying Noah toward the crib with slow movements so he would not wake. But the second Ethan tried to lower him onto the mattress, Noah's eyes snapped open in panic. A distressed cry escaped his throat as his small hands grabbed desperately for Ethan's sweater again. It is okay, Ethan soothed softly, immediately pulling him back against his chest. Noah buried his face against Ethan's shoulder, trembling. The nursery fell silent again. Damien stared at his son in disbelief. He does not even do that with me anymore, he said quietly. Something in his voice made Ethan's chest tighten painfully. Not anger, not jealousy, hurt, deep and private and exhausted. Ethan glanced at him before he could stop himself. Damien looked nothing like the terrifying Mafia Alpha described in headlines and whispered rumors. Standing beside the crib beneath the soft nursery light, he simply looked like a father who had not slept in days. And somehow that felt more dangerous. Because empathy was weakness. Attachment was weakness. Ethan had learned that lesson years ago. Leo suddenly toddled toward Damien without warning, one tiny block still clutched in his hand. Ethan's pulse immediately spiked. Leo, he warned softly. But the toddler ignored him again. Damien remained perfectly still as Leo stopped directly in front of him. The nursery felt painfully quiet. Then Leo lifted the wooden block toward Damien with a sleepy little smile. The letter D painted bright blue on the front. Ethan stopped breathing. Damien slowly accepted the block from the child's tiny hand. His large fingers looked almost unreal beside Leo's small ones. For one strange second, neither of them moved. Then Leo leaned forward and rested his head briefly against Damien's knee with innocent toddler trust. The reaction was immediate. Ethan felt the shift in the alpha before he even looked up. Damien's scent deepened sharply, rich cedarwood filling the nursery with sudden protective warmth powerful enough that Ethan's suppressants struggled to dull its effect. Every omega instinct inside him reacted instantly. Safe. The word flashed traitorously through his mind before panic crushed it down again. Damien looked at Leo differently now. Not politely. Not casually. Like something primal inside him had suddenly awakened. How old is your son? Damien asked quietly. Ethan's throat tightened. 2. Exactly. Ethan hesitated. 1 second too long. Damien noticed. Of course he noticed. The alpha's pale gray eyes locked onto him with terrifying focus, while Leo continued leaning comfortably against his leg like he belonged there. Outside, the rainstorm intensified, thunder rolling low across the skyline. Noah stirred sleepily in Ethan's arms again, but did not wake this time. Damien slowly crouched down in front of Leo, his expensive black shirt tightening across broad shoulders as he lowered himself to the child's level. Then he asked the question Ethan had feared for 2 years. Does Leo have a father? Ethan's entire body locked the moment the question left Damien's mouth. The nursery suddenly felt too small, too warm, too full of cedarwood and storm-soaked alpha scent pressing against his lungs. Leo remained beside Damien's knee completely unafraid, blinking sleepily up at the dangerous man the rest of the city treated like a myth. Ethan tightened his hold on Noah instinctively. Leo's father is not involved, he answered carefully. Damien did not look away from him. That was not what I asked. The quietness in his voice made Ethan's pulse stumble harder than shouting ever could have. Noah shifted against Ethan's chest again, small fingers tangled tightly in his sweater, as though even asleep he sensed the tension surrounding them. Ethan forced himself to stay calm. He had survived worse than difficult questions. He had survived 2 years of hiding. It is complicated, he said softly. Damien finally straightened to his full height. The movement alone changed the atmosphere inside the room. 1 second he had looked almost approachable crouched beside Leo. The next he was Damien Blackwell again. Untouchable, powerful, dangerous in the quietest possible way. Everything involving me tends to become complicated eventually, he said. Ethan's stomach tightened painfully. There it was. Not recognition. Not yet. But instinct. The terrifying instinct Alpha bloodlines carried beneath logic. Damien did not know the truth, but something inside him already felt wrong enough to keep pulling at the thread. Leo suddenly yawned and reached both arms upward toward Damien without hesitation. Ethan's breath caught sharply in his throat. Toddlers were unpredictable, innocent. They did not understand secrets carefully built to survive. Up, Leo mumbled sleepily. The room went completely silent. Damien looked genuinely surprised for the first time that night. Ethan moved immediately. Leo is tired, he said quickly, stepping forward to collect his son before Damien could react. But Leo frowned, lower lip trembling slightly, as Ethan lifted him away. The tiny sound of disappointment that escaped him hit Damien harder than it should have. Ethan saw it happen in real time. The Alpha's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, some deep protective instinct reacting before reason caught up. It was subtle, dangerous because it was subtle. He trusts you fast, Damien said quietly. Ethan avoided his eyes. Leo likes people. No, Damien's voice remained calm. He likes me. Ethan froze. The confidence behind those words sent cold panic sliding beneath his skin. Because Damien was right. Leo rarely approached strangers willingly, especially Alphas. Ethan had spent years carefully managing sin exposure, avoiding powerful Alpha environments, keeping their lives small and hidden and safe. But Leo had crossed the nursery toward Damien like something inside him already knew where he belonged. Noah stirred again at the sound of Damien's voice. Slowly, sleepily, the little boy opened his eyes. His gaze immediately searched the room until it landed on Leo in Ethan's arms. Relief softened his tiny face instantly. Then Noah reached one small hand toward Leo again with a weak, sleepy whimper. Ethan's chest ached at the sight. Damien stared at his son for a long moment before speaking quietly. He has not looked peaceful since his mother died. Ethan looked up before he could stop himself. Damien rarely appeared in public with anyone. Rumors about Noah's mother changed constantly, depending on who was talking. Some claimed she abandoned them. Others said she had died years ago. Nobody actually knew. Damien noticed Ethan's reaction immediately. You did not ask, he said. Ethan swallowed carefully. It did not feel like my place. Something unreadable flickered across Damien's face, then disappeared. The rain outside softened slightly, leaving only the distant rumble of thunder over the city. For one fragile moment the nursery no longer felt cold. Noah rested quietly against Ethan's shoulder while Leo played sleepily with the buttons on Ethan's sweater. And Damien stood watching them with an expression that looked far too much like longing. That was the moment Ethan understood the real danger. It was not discovery. It was attachment. Because the way Damien looked at the boys now was changing everything. A knock suddenly broke the silence. One of Damien's security men stepped into the doorway, tense enough that Ethan immediately noticed. Sir, the man said carefully. Dr. Holloway is here. Damien's expression hardened instantly. I did not call him. He said he came because of the emergency blood work results for Master Noah. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. Blood work. Damien slowly turned toward Ethan then, toward Leo. And this time, the suspicion in his pale gray eyes was impossible to miss. Ethan's fingers tightened protectively around Leo the second he heard the words blood work results. Every instinct inside him screamed the same thing. Run. Leave before Damien connected the impossible similarities that had started piling up around them like loaded matches near gasoline. But Noah remained curled against his chest, warm and half asleep, breathing softly into the fabric of Ethan's sweater as though he had finally found somewhere safe enough to rest. Ethan had not expected that part to hurt. He had prepared himself for fear, suspicion, danger, not this aching tenderness spreading through the nursery like a slow poison. Damien glanced toward the doorway again. "Give us a minute," he told the guard quietly. The man nodded immediately and disappeared down the hall. Silence settled heavily over the room once more. Ethan could hear the distant grandfather clock somewhere deeper inside the mansion ticking softly through the quiet. Rainwater slid down the windows in silver streaks while the nursery lights cast warm shadows across Noah's sleeping face. Damien looked at his son for a long moment before speaking again. "He trusts you more after 1 hour than he has trusted anyone in months." Ethan swallowed carefully. Children can feel when someone is trying too hard. Is that what I have been doing? The question caught Ethan off guard because there was no arrogance in it. No anger either. Just exhaustion. Real exhaustion. Damien stepped closer toward the rocking chair slowly, his expensive black shirt slightly wrinkled now from hours spent beside Noah's crib. For the first time that night, Ethan noticed the dark circles beneath the Alpha's pale gray eyes, the slight roughness in his voice, the way he kept watching Noah breathe like he was afraid the silence might disappear if he looked away too long. "I think," Ethan answered softly, "you are scared." Damien's gaze lifted sharply toward him. Ethan immediately regretted the honesty. Nobody probably spoke to Damien Blackwell like that. But instead of anger, something fragile crossed Damien's expression before it disappeared again. "You say that like you understand it." Ethan looked down at Noah instinctively. He understood too well. Every single day of Leo's life had been built around fear. Fear of being discovered. Fear of losing him. Fear of not being enough. "Parents do not sleep much," he murmured quietly. Damien stared at him for another long second, and Ethan suddenly became painfully aware of how close they were standing. The Alpha's scent had softened now that Noah was calm, less sharp dominance, and more warm cedarwood after rain. Dangerous because it felt comforting. Leo shifted sleepily in Ethan's other arm, tiny fingers absent-mindedly gripping the collar of Ethan's sweater. Damien's eyes followed the movement instantly. "Does Leo always cling to you like that?" he asked quietly. Ethan nodded. "Since he was born." Something unreadable flickered behind Damien's eyes again. Longing. Recognition. Maybe both. Noah suddenly made a soft, distressed sound in his sleep. Ethan instinctively rocked him gently before the cry could fully form. The reaction was immediate. Noah relaxed against him again almost instantly. Damien watched the movement like he could not look away. "You make it seem easy," he said. Ethan gave a faint, tired smile before he could stop himself. "It usually means I am one spilled juice box away from a nervous breakdown." To Ethan's surprise, Damien let out the quietest breath of laughter. Barely there. Rough from disuse. But real. The sound changed his entire face for one dangerous second, softening the cold edges enough that Ethan caught a glimpse of the man Damien might have been before grief and power carved him into something untouchable. And that terrified Ethan more than anything else tonight, because he could already feel himself starting to care. A sharp knock interrupted the fragile moment. The nursery door opened before either of them could step back. Dr. Holloway entered carrying a tablet and several printed documents. His eyes immediately landed on Ethan holding Noah, then on Leo. The older beta doctor froze. Confusion flashed across his face, so suddenly Ethan's stomach dropped. "Sir," Dr. Holloway said slowly, still staring at Leo. "I did not realize there was another child here tonight." Damien's expression hardened again instantly. "You said the blood work could not wait." "Yes." But the doctor kept looking at Leo with growing unease. "Actually, this may explain why Noah's test results came back abnormal." Ethan felt cold panic crawl down his spine. Damien took one step closer. "Explain." Dr. Holloway hesitated. Then he looked directly at Damien and spoke the sentence Ethan had dreaded for 2 years. "Sir, Noah's results show signs of an active biological bond response. The kind infants usually only develop around immediate family." The room went deathly still after Dr. Holloway spoke. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat pounding violently in his ears while Leo shifted sleepily against his shoulder, completely unaware that one sentence had just shattered the fragile safety Ethan spent 2 years building. Damien did not move at first. He simply stared at the doctor with terrifying stillness. Explain exactly what that means, he said quietly. Dr. Holloway adjusted his glasses nervously. Young children with rare alpha bloodlines sometimes develop instinctive biological attachment responses to immediate relatives, usually parents, siblings, occasionally extended family members with strong scent compatibility. Noah stirred again in Ethan's arms as though reacting to the tension thickening the nursery air. The little boy made a distressed sound and instinctively buried his face deeper into Ethan's chest. Damien's gaze followed the movement immediately. Then slowly, dangerously, his eyes lifted toward Leo. Ethan's stomach twisted so hard it hurt. That does not prove anything, Ethan said quickly before silence could become suspicion. Dr. Holloway nodded carefully. No, of course not. But Master Noah's response tonight is unusually strong. Damien stepped closer. Strong enough to what? The doctor hesitated just long enough to make Ethan panic harder. Strong enough that the child's nervous system appears calmer in the presence of the other boy. His cortisol levels dropped dramatically within 40 minutes. Damien looked at Noah sleeping peacefully against Ethan's chest, then at Leo, then back at Ethan. And Ethan knew with sick certainty that the Alpha was no longer looking at them like strangers. Something had shifted permanently tonight. I want a complete explanation by morning, Damien said quietly to the doctor. And I want every specialist in New York reviewing those results. Yes, sir. Dr. Holloway nodded quickly before retreating from the nursery, with visible tension still written across his face. The door closed softly behind him. Ethan immediately stood. I should go. Noah woke instantly. A frightened cry escaped him as his tiny hands grabbed Ethan's sweater again in panic. The sound sliced straight through the room. Ethan froze helplessly while Noah clung tighter, tears already forming again after only seconds apart. Damien moved before thinking. Wait. The single word landed heavily between them. Ethan looked up slowly. Damien was staring at Noah, with visible conflict tightening his expression. Then his gaze shifted toward Ethan again. He is terrified you are leaving. Ethan's chest ached painfully. Children get attached fast. No, Damien took another slow step closer. Not like this. Ethan could not breathe correctly anymore. The nursery suddenly felt dangerously warm, thick with cedarwood scent and emotional tension that refused to break apart. Noah continued trembling softly against Ethan, while Leo sleepily rested his head on Ethan's shoulder, safe and trusting and heartbreakingly unaware of how close everything was to collapsing. Damien looked at the boys for a long moment before speaking again. Stay tonight. Ethan blinked in shock. What? Noah has not slept peacefully in days. Damien's voice remained calm, but something desperate hid underneath it now. If you leave and he starts screaming again. He stopped speaking abruptly, jaw tightening hard enough for Ethan to notice. The silence afterward felt strangely intimate. Ethan realized with sudden alarm that Damien Blackwell was asking him for help, not ordering him. Worse than that, he sounded afraid. Ethan looked down at Noah's exhausted little face. Leaving would make the child cry again. Staying might destroy all of them. I cannot, Ethan whispered. Damien's expression hardened slightly. Why? Because Leo has your eyes. Because your son already feels bonded to him. Because every instinct in this room is beginning to recognize something I cannot let you discover. Ethan swallowed the truth before it could reach his lips. This world is not safe for someone like me, he said quietly instead. Damien stared at him with sharp focus. Someone like you. Ethan immediately regretted the words. Too revealing. Too honest. The Alpha noticed everything. You flinch every time my guards move, Damien said quietly. You keep looking toward the exits. And when Holloway mentioned bloodlines, your heart rate changed. Ethan's pulse stumbled violently. Damien stepped closer again until only inches separated them now. Ethan could smell the rain still lingering faintly on his clothes beneath the cedarwood scent. Noah rested between them like fragile gravity, pulling everything tighter together. Who are you hiding from, Ethan? Damien asked softly. Before Ethan could answer, Leo suddenly lifted his sleepy head from Ethan's shoulder and reached toward Damien again with tiny, trusting hands. Daddy, the toddler mumbled drowsily. The world stopped. Silence crashed over the nursery so completely that Ethan could hear the rain tapping softly against the windows again. Leo blinked sleepily after speaking. unaware that one tiny word had just shattered the careful distance Damien had been trying to maintain all night. Ethan felt every ounce of warmth leave his body. Noah stirred weakly between them, still half asleep against Ethan's chest, but Damien did not look away from Leo. Not even for a second. The Alpha's pale gray eyes stayed locked on the toddler with an expression Ethan could not survive seeing. Hope. Raw and dangerous and impossibly fragile. Leo, Ethan said softly, his voice tightening. Baby, you are tired. But the little boy only reached toward Damien again. Daddy. He repeated sleepily, tiny fingers opening and closing in the air. Ethan's pulse became painfully uneven. Toddlers copied words constantly. Leo had called waiters daddy once when he was younger because another child did it first at a grocery store. It meant nothing. It had to mean nothing. But the nursery no longer felt grounded in logic. Not after Noah's biological bond response. Not after the silver eyes. Not after the way both boys had instinctively reached for each other, like missing pieces finally reconnecting. Damien moved slowly this time, almost cautiously, like he was afraid sudden movement might break something invisible between them. Then he reached out and took Leo carefully into his arms. Ethan's breath caught immediately. Every instinct screamed at him to stop this before it went too far. But Leo settled against Damien's chest with immediate comfort, tiny hand gripping the front of the Alpha's black shirt, while a sleepy sigh escaped him. Damien froze. Ethan saw it happen in real time. The exact second something inside the Alpha gave way completely. The dangerous coldness Damien carried around everyone else vanished beneath something unbearably soft as he looked down at the child in his arms. Leo rested his cheek against Damien's shoulder naturally, trustingly, like he had done it 1,000 times before. Noah made a quiet sound from Ethan's arms and reached toward them both. Ethan carefully lowered him just enough for Noah's tiny fingers to brush against Leo's sleeve again. The little boy immediately relaxed. Damien stared at the boys together in silence. Two children with matching pale gray eyes beneath the nursery light. Two boys instinctively calming each other with impossible ease. Ethan felt panic building harder inside his chest because the scene looked wrong in the most dangerous possible way. It looked like a family. Damien slowly sat down in the rocking chair beside the crib without taking his eyes off Leo. The movement felt strangely intimate, grounding the storm of tension into something quieter and somehow worse. Ethan remained standing beside him, trapped between running and staying. How old was Noah when his mother died? He asked softly before he could stop himself. Damien's expression shifted slightly. 6 months. Ethan's chest tightened painfully. That explained the fear, the attachment issues, the endless crying. Noah had lost comfort before he was old enough to understand loss. Damien looked down at Leo sleeping peacefully against him. After that, he stopped sleeping through the night, he admitted quietly. Every nanny eventually quit. Ethan swallowed hard. Children remember absence even when they cannot explain it. Damien looked at him then, really looked at him, and something dangerously emotional passed between them. Recognition without answers. Loneliness recognizing loneliness. Ethan hated how much he understood the exhaustion buried beneath Damien's calm exterior. He hated even more that part of him wanted to stay. Noah slowly reached toward Damien from Ethan's arms. The Alpha immediately shifted closer on instinct, one large hand gently brushing over Noah's hair with surprising tenderness. The little boy relaxed completely beneath the touch. Ethan watched the moment quietly and felt something crack inside him. Because for one impossible second, the nursery no longer felt like the mansion of a feared Mafia Alpha. It felt warm, safe, whole. The exact kind of fragile happiness Ethan stopped allowing himself to imagine a long time ago. Then Damien spoke softly into the silence. Stay for a week. Ethan blinked in shock. Damien's eyes never left the boys. No one needs this, he said quietly. And I think, his voice faltered slightly before steadying again. I think I do too. Ethan's chest ached so sharply it almost felt unbearable. Because the worst part was that he wanted to say yes. Before he could answer, Damien's phone suddenly vibrated sharply against the armrest beside him. The Alpha glanced down at the screen. His entire expression darkened instantly. Ethan felt the atmosphere shift again. Cold. Dangerous. Real. Damien answered without looking away from Leo. What? A pause. Then his jaw tightened hard enough for Ethan to notice immediately. How did they get that information? Ethan's stomach dropped. Damien slowly rose to his feet, still holding Leo protectively against his chest now. Then the Alpha looked directly at Ethan with terrifying focus. Someone outside this house already knows there is another child connected to Noah. Ethan felt the floor disappear beneath him. The nursery suddenly seemed colder again despite the warmth of Noah against his chest, and Leo sleeping peacefully in Damien's arms. Someone knew. Somehow, after 2 years of running quietly from city to city, changing apartments, avoiding every official record possible, someone had finally connected Leo to the Blackwell family. Damien ended the call slowly, but the tension radiating from him had completely changed. The softness Ethan glimpsed moments ago was still there beneath the surface, but now it wrapped itself around something far more dangerous. Protective instinct. Possession. Fear. What happened? Ethan asked quietly, though part of him already knew he did not want the answer. Damien looked at him carefully before speaking. One of my security teams intercepted a data request connected to Noah's medical files. Ethan's stomach twisted harder. And the request included age estimates for a second child. Ethan stopped breathing for a second. Rain continued sliding down the nursery windows in silver streaks, while the mansion beyond the room remained eerily silent. Somewhere downstairs, distant footsteps moved through marble hallways as Damien's security tightened around the estate. Ethan could feel it happening already. The shift from private family crisis to something larger. Something dangerous. Leo stirred sleepily in Damien's arms and instinctively curled closer against the Alpha's chest. Damien adjusted his hold on the child without hesitation now, broad hand resting protectively against Leo's back like the movement belonged to him naturally. Ethan could not stop staring at it. The image hurt in ways he was not prepared for. Because Leo looked comfortable there. Safe. Whole. You should leave, Ethan whispered suddenly. Damien's eyes snapped toward him immediately. No, the answer came too fast. Too certain. Ethan tightened his hold on Noah. You do not understand. Then explain it to me. Ethan looked away first. He had spent 2 years rehearsing lies, building walls, surviving by never staying long enough for attachment to become dangerous. But standing here now with Noah asleep against his shoulder and Leo breathing softly in Damien's arms, every wall inside him felt dangerously weak. There are people who would use children to control powerful families, he admitted quietly. People who trade information. Bloodlines. Connections. Damien stepped closer slowly. And you think that is why someone is searching for Leo? Ethan nodded once. It started before he was born. Silence stretched between them again. Damien studied him carefully, the intensity in his pale gray eyes almost unbearable now. Who threatened you? Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Not because he wanted to hide the truth anymore. Because saying any part of it out loud suddenly felt real. After I got pregnant, someone offered me money to disappear quietly, he admitted. When I refused, they started following me. Damien's entire expression darkened. Ethan saw it instantly. Not rage exactly. Worse. Cold calculation. Who? Ethan shook his head immediately. I never saw faces. Just messages. Phone calls. Someone always knew where I moved next. Damien looked down at Leo sleeping peacefully against his chest. Something shifted inside the Alpha again then. Ethan could almost see the moment the emotional distance disappeared completely. It was no longer curiosity keeping Damien here. It was attachment. The dangerous, irreversible kind. Noah suddenly stirred against Ethan and reached sleepily toward Damien, without fully waking. Damien moved closer on instinct until Noah's small hand brushed against the sleeve of his black shirt. The little boy relaxed immediately afterward. Ethan's chest tightened painfully at the sight. 2 children unconsciously reaching toward the same man for comfort. Damien looked at Noah, then at Leo, before finally lifting his eyes back to Ethan. You were running alone with a baby. Ethan swallowed hard. I had to. You should not have had to. The quietness in Damien's voice nearly broke something inside Ethan completely. Nobody had ever said that to him before. Not once in 2 exhausting years of survival and fear and pretending he was strong enough to carry all of it alone. Ethan looked away quickly before Damien could see too much on his face. But the Alpha stepped closer again anyway until only inches separated them beside Noah's crib. Ethan could smell rain and cedarwood and warmth surrounding him from every direction now. Dangerous warmth. the kind that made lonely people forget to protect themselves. Stay here, Damien said softly. With me. Ethan's pulse stumbled violently. Damien, no more running. His voice dropped lower. Roughened by emotion, he was no longer hiding well. Whatever this is, whatever connects them. His eyes moved briefly toward the boys before returning to Ethan again. I want to protect it. Ethan felt tears burn unexpectedly behind his eyes because for one impossible second, he believed him. Then the nursery lights flickered once. Twice. The entire mansion suddenly went dark. Darkness swallowed the nursery in an instant. Ethan's heart slammed painfully against his ribs as the mansion lost power, the soft glow from the city skyline outside becoming the only light left in the room. Noah woke immediately with a frightened cry while Leo startled awake in Damien's arms, tiny fingers clutching tightly against the Alpha's shirt. Somewhere downstairs, security alarms began echoing faintly through the estate. Ethan's first instinct was panic. Run, grab Leo, and disappear before whoever had been searching finally reached them. But before he could move, Damien stepped directly in front of him. The movement happened so naturally it took Ethan a second to realize what the Alpha had done. Shielded them, even in darkness, even with confusion spreading through the mansion. Damien's body instinctively positioned itself between Ethan, the children, and every possible threat beyond the nursery door. Look at me, Damien said quietly. Ethan forced himself to lift his eyes. The city lights filtering through the rain painted silver across Damien's face, softening the sharp edges of the feared Mafia Alpha until he looked less like a dangerous stranger and more like a man terrified of losing something precious for the second time in his life. Noah cried softly again. Ethan immediately tried to calm him, but Damien reached out first. Large warm fingers brushed gently against Noah's hair, while Leo remained tucked securely against Damien's chest. The effect was immediate. Noah's cries faded into shaky little breaths as both boys instinctively leaned closer toward Damien at the same time. Ethan felt his chest ache so deeply it almost hurt to breathe. The image in front of him looked impossibly right. My entire life, Damien said quietly into the darkness. People have stayed because they feared me. Ethan's pulse slowed just enough to hear the rough honesty in his voice. Tonight is the first time I have wanted someone to stay because they felt safe. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Those words broke through every wall he had left. 2 years of exhaustion crashed over him all at once. Running while pregnant. Sleeping in cheap apartments with a newborn pressed against his chest. Waking up terrified every time an unfamiliar car parked outside too long. Pretending loneliness hurt less than danger. And through all of it, Leo had still grown into a child who reached instinctively toward warmth instead of fear. Ethan looked at Damien holding Leo protectively in the darkness, while Noah leaned trustingly against his side. Somehow, without either of them realizing it, the children had already chosen each other. Maybe they had chosen Damien too. I was 22 when I met you, Ethan admitted softly before fear could stop him. Damien went completely still. At the Bellamy Hotel Gala downtown. Ethan swallowed hard. You were standing alone on the balcony during the storm because everyone inside wanted something from you. Recognition flickered across Damien's face slowly. Fragile. Unbelieving. Ethan's voice trembled slightly despite himself. You told me the rain smelled cleaner from 40 stories up. Damien stared at him like the world had tilted beneath his feet. Ethan, I never meant to disappear. The confession hurt more than Ethan expected. But after I found out about Leo, people started watching me. Asking questions. Someone wanted access to your bloodline through him. Damien looked down at Leo sleeping safely against his chest, and something shattered quietly in his expression. Not anger. Grief. The grief of realizing how much had been stolen before he even knew it existed. You carried this alone, he said softly. Ethan laughed weakly through burning eyes. I tried. The emergency backup lights suddenly flickered on throughout the nursery, bathing the room in soft golden light. Noah blinked sleepily against Ethan's shoulder while Leo stirred in Damien's arms, both boys calm for the first time all night. Rain continued falling outside the windows, but softer now, gentler. Damien stepped closer until only inches separated them again. No fear left between them this time. Just exhaustion. Relief. Something deeper quietly taking root. No more running, Damien whispered. Ethan looked at him for a long moment before finally nodding once. The tension inside Damien's shoulders loosened immediately, almost imperceptibly, but enough for Ethan to notice. Then Noah reached sleepily toward Leo again. Damien carefully lowered himself beside the crib while Ethan sat beside him, their shoulders brushing lightly for the first time. Leo curled instinctively against Noah's side the moment they were close enough. The little boy sighed almost simultaneously